What is up, everybody? Hoang Zero here, and today we are going to discuss the mid-January ban list predictions that we will be receiving for the Digimon card game. In this video, we will be dissecting different analytical points across the BT7 and BT8 metas from the Japanese format, and we will be looking at the data to create a non-biased and abides by some logical rules, realistic format changes. So, without further ado, let's kick right into it. Alright, to kick things off, we're going to start with the logic that we used to create the rules and how we decided what cards needed to get hit on the limit and ban list. Rule number 1, limiting or banning the card in question will not remove any existing archetype, but will rather put them in line with the remaining decks in the format. Now, if you've ever played Yu-Gi-Oh, you know for sure that when some cards get hit on the ban list, it more or less eliminates that deck entirely from the meta, and we want to try and avoid that. We want it to just hit decks that are too powerful and keep them in line with everyone else. For example, Hidden Potential Discovered saw a lot of success in Japanese format. Some were saying that the G-Sorption may have been a little too strong, and so we saw Hidden Potential Discovered and Argomon 5 get hit, and then as a result, it fell into line with Shine Greymon, Omnimon, and other tier 1 decks. Rule number 2. Cards proposed on this ban list are specifically cards that create unfair advantages, and generally these are cards that abuse the memory system in terms of cost and efficiency. This is, again, prime example, Hidden Potential Discovered. It is a zero cost option that allows you to digivolve for free, more or less. Like, the cost is to rest your Digimon, but that's not really a cost. That's a pretty easy cost to fulfill. And so generally, the cards that we're looking at are going to be 0 to 1 cost overall, and that's just not healthy for the game because memory is the most important mechanic in this game. It's what draws a lot of people in, and we don't want to try and abuse that. Rule number 3. Cards may be targeted not due to being the problem itself, but rather to preserve deck archetypes. So let's say there's a very problematic card, but we can't hit that card, because if we hit that card, then that completely kills off an archetype, and so we might hit the next card in line that happens to also be problematic, but not as problematic as the first card. And by doing so, we make it so that deck is able to maintain its identity while simultaneously also be lowered. And we'll talk about examples of that point when we go through the video. Rule number 4. While the card in question may not be an issue in the current format, it may present an issue in the future. There are cards that may not be good right now, and that can easily be broken or limit card design in the future. Another great example, I say this again and again because HPD really should be at 0, but HPD is an example. Hidden Potential Discovered and green in general is not a very strong color in BT6. BT7, it's very, it's there, but it's not super strong. No one's gonna contest it for best deck in the format. But Hidden Potential Discovered is a card that not only limits green as a whole, but also it's just too poorly designed. I mean, anytime green comes out with a insane level 6, then you have to consider how does HPD interact with that. They have to design around HPD. Really, HPD should just go to 0. And 5. Every card that we propose, we have done our best to eliminate all bias and look at it from a strictly analytical POV. I know it's impossible to completely eliminate bias. Everyone's point of view will always have some semblance of bias, so we really do try to remove that, and by doing so, we can have a more true and fair ban list proposal. So this video, all the analysis and whatnot, was done by myself, Tessero, Zero Raven, and Desi. And Zero Raven and Tessero are both really great players. Tessero is one of the best players, purple players in North America. Zero Raven is also a very accomplished player himself, and Desi is a Japanese format player who lives in Japan at the current moment, and so his insight was also very useful given that this ban list is targeted towards future formats. So let's jump right into the data. Alright, so this is data pulled from CG Guides. CG Guides compiles all of the Twitter results from the Japanese format, and so this is specifically targeting the BT7 format. So if you look, Yellow Hybrid, which is one of the more problematic decks that we're going to talk about, has 88 results on the site alone, and this may not include results that did not get reported or personal testing as well. So this is just whatever was on Twitter, right? So there's other resources that may have been used that may also make it so it's just more than 88. But yellow hybrid, very, very much so, was a huge part of the BT7 meta. Blue hybrid following up at 85. Blue hybrid is also very, very problematic, and we'll talk about that as well. And then the third highest is red hybrid, but it is behind significantly, almost 30 tops behind. But if you notice, the three best decks, statistically speaking, are hybrid decks, right? And the issue with hybrid decks and why they're so problematic is because there's a lack of interaction. As of the BT7 format, the only way to interact with Tamers is Omnimon Zwart Defeat, as he is the only way to remove Tamers. We can resort to using cards such as Menawa or Argomon level 6 from BT5, I believe, and that's not going to be enough, you know, as case proven right here. So given that, we really do have to analyze why hybrid is so powerful, and again, it's because there's that very little interaction that you can really do. Following up at 4th place, we have Bond of Friendship with 45, and then Jesmon, Lilith Loop, and then Green Hybrid. So BT7 very, very dominated by the hybrid trend. Looking at BT8 as well as EX2, this is the current Japanese format being recorded as this video is on December 29th, 2021, we see that yellow hybrid and blue hybrid yet again remain the top two decks of the format, very close to one another. And then third following up is blue-green Jagras Evolution or Imperial Dramon. And then Challenger Cup is a series of events, so that's not really a deck archetype per se. And then we have Red Jesmon, Mastemon, Black War Greymon. So even in BT8 EX2, we do see that hybrids remain a very, very overwhelming force. They abuse Susano Mega Digimon Fusion a lot in BT8, and so we're really going to tackle that issue. But the main point I want to drive home is the fact that hybrid is very much so an issue because of the lack of interaction from Tamers, meaning that you can do the MDF Susano combo extremely easy. There's nothing your opponent can do to interrupt that. You have cards like Ice Wall, Reinforced Memory Boost, Jet Sylphimon, a whole plethora of things, Korikaku Tommy. BT7 is just very, very powerful, and we need to tone that down a little bit. So coming up is our proposal. Now, the proposed limitation and ban list that we at the Hoang Zero believe is going to be relatively fair and realistic is Ice Wall to 1, Mega Digimon Fusion to 0, and Reinforced to 1. So the reason why we say 1 instead of just flat out 0 is because of the precedent that was established by Hidden Potential Discovered as well as Argomon level 5. Both of those cards went to 1, even HPD, which definitely should have been at 0, went to 1. And so using that precedent, we can assume that if a card gets hit, it's most likely going to 1. But note that they did use the terminology limitation / ban list, which means that we may see cards actually go to 0. And out of all the cards in the game that definitely needs to go to 0, it's definitely MDF. MDF needs to be at 0. This card is absolutely way too much value that it generates, and for no reason whatsoever. It's especially problematic with hybrids. Even if you were to remove Ice Wall and Reinforcing Memory Boost, MDF would still be a huge issue that hybrids could abuse, so we have to just get rid of it completely. It also makes it so level 7s in the future could easily be abused by this card. Ice Wall has been a problem since the BT6 format in Japanese once they got the EX collection. Gabumon was abusing that card very, very heavily, and even in BT8 EX2, we're still seeing Ice Wall played at 4 of in most blue decks. Ice Wall is a card that just you can't interact with. It's just really frustrating to play against, and we'll touch more on that in a bit. And then Reinforcing Memory Boost, we'll also get to that in a second. So a more thorough analysis over Ice Wall. Ice Wall, again, is a huge buff to blue in general, but it is a very uninteractable card that creates frustration for players as they can't swing without being punished. Ice Wall definitely needed to be either a 2 or 3 cost, it definitely needed to be memory blockable, and it needed to not be stackable. But all 3 of those conditions, it met none of them. It's literally a 1 cost, can't be memory blocked, and it's stackable, and it's just, why? Why is this card so frustrating? Like, why would you do this? So Ice Wall, a lot of people are gonna say, oh, just play around it. I don't like, you're just complaining because you can't play the game. And realistically, Ice Wall is just a very frustrating card. It costs too little. If you've ever played against Gabumon, Ancient Gabumon specifically, with Analog Boy and everything, the combo is Ancient Garurumon, swing twice, okay, you're at 0 memory, pass turn with Ice Wall, turn technically passes, Ancient Garurumon dies, so you spawn in a hybrid level 4, Analog Boy puts you back to 0, and then you can lock them to 3 by playing a card, since they're most likely going to go to 3 anyway because of Tamer, and that alone is an insanely powerful turn. And then again, Ice Wall is still being played as a flat 4 of in every single blue deck in BT8 EX2. So 2 sets later and we're still in Ice Wall format. This card is extremely problematic as it just does not allow the opponent to play the game. If you get hit with Ice Wall 4 times in a row, you definitely are ready to just tilt off the face of the earth. So I think eliminating Ice Wall, or at least putting it to 1, will reduce the frustration that players will feel. At 1, you can definitely deal with 1 Ice Wall. It's not like it's going to get stacked on you either. So 0 or 1, most likely 1, that's realistic. Now, Mega Digimon Fusion. The one card I think needs to definitely go to 0 alongside HPD. Currently, we see MDF primarily used and abused by Lilith Loop. Lilith Loop is a very popular deck amongst players. However, in BT8 especially, we will see hybrid decks abusing the Mega Digimon Fusion. This allows them to go into Susanomon for 0 and then OTK their opponent from that range, because Susanomon is by itself a flat 3 damage, pop 1, and then from that range you can most likely end your opponent off of a hybrid evolution over Tamer. Because Tamers are, for the most part, uninteractable, this means your Mega Digimon Fusion lethal combo is most likely going to resolve. If you're wondering, oh, but it's a white card, how are you going to resolve this? Well, Analog Boy exists. Analog Boy is just way too generic, most decks can fit it in, and so that's just an easy way to fit in the MDF. Mega Digimon Fusion also just poses an issue in general for whenever we get more level 7s in the future, as it just really restricts card design. So definitely we need to get rid of Mega Digimon Fusion. And now, Reinforced Memory Boost. Yellow Hybrid, as we've pointed out, is one of the strongest decks in both BT7 and BT8 because it is a grind deck with extreme amount of healing via Jet Sylphimon as well as Reinforced Memory Boost. And while Jet Sylphimon may be the problem card overall in the Yellow Hybrid deck, if you hit Jet Sylphimon, you essentially eliminate all of Yellow Hybrid's archetype, because then there's no level 5 yellow card that you have as a replacement. Yellow Hybrid's entire identity is basically Jet Sylphimon, and so we can't hit that because, again, one of our rules is we don't want to eliminate deck archetypes. And so second in line is the Reinforced Memory Boost. This card is pretty problematic in that deck, and so instead of hitting Jet Sylphimon, let's hit the second thing in the line. Hitting a Reinforced Memory Boost also makes it a lot harder for Yellow to resolve their form of the Susanomon one-turn kill. This means that they have to rely a lot more on TK Kari in order to get enough memory to pull the combo off, because they're not like Blue. They don't have access to free Vulcan Hammers and whatnot. Now, following the list of cards that definitely need to get hit, we have an honorable mentions list. Honorable mentions are cards that we think could potentially get hit, but we're not entirely sure, and we don't foresee this in the future, but Bandai should, potentially entertain the idea. Eismon to 2, choice restriction between Greymon and Jessmon, and I'll explain what a choice restriction is and whatnot, and then Tommy to 2. And so a choice restriction is a method of limitation that Bushiroad implements for their card games, especially Cardfight Vanguard. And what a choice restriction is you cannot have the 2 choice restricted cards in the same deck. So let's say there is a choice restriction between Greymon and Jessmon. Well, that means you cannot use a deck that has both starter deck Greymon and BT6 Jessmon. That would then be illegal, so you have to choose one or the other, and that would fix a lot of issues on its own, but we'll talk about that in this upcoming part. And then Eismon and Tommy, if you've played the Japanese format, you definitely know these cards are very, very powerful. Now, Eismon is up on the honorable mentions list because Eismon is just a lot of value generate. Scatter mode specifically, as it's the requirement in order to summon Eismon, scatter mode is when deleted, draw 3, discard 2. So it's Graceful Charity, and in the context of purple, that's absolutely insane because then you can discard the regular Eismon, and by doing so, you're able to revive Eismon. Reviving Eismon is extremely potent given Chimeramon is in the BT8 format, and by reviving double Eismon, because you can discard 2 Eismon and then you'll revive both, this will mean you can immediately Jogress into Chimeramon and then pop off from there, because Chimeramon is a 0-cost evolution if you Jogress. This nets way too much advantage, and so the easiest way to limit the Eismon engine while simultaneously not completely killing it off is you limit Eismon to 2. What this means, instead of hitting scatter mode, so by leaving scatter mode at 4, purple is able to continue to cycle for value, because if you know, purple can at times be a little bit of bricky. It's a very combo eccentric deck, so you want it to have that amount of cycle to keep going. But also, if you just limit the Argomon specifically, it's very unlikely that they're going to be able to summon double Argomon and then immediately go into the Chimera play, which then does a bunch of Mosdemon like shenanigans. So this is a really good hit. I feel like that not only lowers the ceiling for purple significantly, but also allows the deck to stay relevant. Now to touch on the choice restriction proposal for Greymon, Jesmon, especially in the best of 1 format that primarily all Japanese locals do, is extremely annoying. Imagine you go to play locals, you're best of 1, you have 1 shot every round, and Jesmon just high rolled you. That's super frustrating. I get that. A lot of people are not a fan of that, and so a lot of people are calling for Jesmon to get hit, specifically Savior, because Savior is the quote-unquote problematic card in Jesmon. However, at the current time of this video, if you hit Savior Hackmon, then what ends up happening is that Jesmon completely falls apart as a deck. It would no longer be a viable deck. And again, we want to abide by the rule of we want to keep decks, relevant. And so the choice restriction proposal, which I don't foresee Bandai going for, but I think could be a really good idea, is by preventing Jesmon from using Greymon, they would not be able to OTK you every single game, a lot less frequently, because Jesmon would then only be able to swing for 2 damage a pop, assuming they have tie. If they go for 3 on Voltramon, that means they don't have Savior. And swinging for 4 damage and then Omnimon Blitz for 5, that is a lot more manageable than them going 3-3 and then game for Omni. So I think this choice restriction would be a really smart idea from Bandai's part, but I don't foresee it. I just wanted to bring this up. And finally, we get to Tommy. For those of you that do not know what Tommy is, because he is a BT7 card, Tommy is on play, trash the bottom 3 Digivolution cards of one of your opponent's Digimon, and that's almost an entire stack. That's quite a bit. That's probably a bit much. Definitely should have been like 1 or 2. And then ESS, when attacking, once per turn, one of your opponent's Digimon with no Digivolution cards cannot attack or block until the end of your opponent's turn. Tommy is definitely the more problematic card of the Korikaku Tommy duo. Korikakumon being when you digivolve over a hybrid or a Tommy, you are able to stun a card so they cannot attack or block. The reason why Tommy is a lot more problematic is, number 1, you can constantly use Tommy's ESS every single turn, whereas Korikakumon is a lot more difficult to keep getting that recursion value. In order for you to recycle Korikakumon, you'd have to bounce it with Beowulfmon, and that's a lot more effort than just swinging every single turn to get Tommy. Again, Tommy Strip 3, super cost efficient, almost a little too cost efficient. And then the proposal that we have is we reduce Tommy to 2. So Tommy being to 2 allows Blue Source Strip to still be a relative deck, but it also means that digivolving over your Tommy blindly to do the Korikaku play opens you up to a lot more punishment, because then you're losing out on your Tommies. You'd have to Susanomon it back. That's not really feasible because you're passing over a lot of memory unless you have MDF, which should get hit. But Tommy definitely being reduced to 2 would not only reduce the consistency overall of the blue hybrid stun variant, but also it would just mean that they're not getting as much value, while still at the same time you still allow them to do a little bit of that stun, just not an obnoxious amount. Also, by hitting Tommy, Korikakumon is indirectly hit because the overall cost of Korikakumon increases, and the reason for that is because you only get Korikakumon stun if you digivolve over a Tommy or a hybrid, and in order to digivolve over a hybrid, that is going to cost you a 1 memory, but the initial hybrid evolution will cost 2, so overall that is a 3 cost evolution. And now a list of cards that we think will potentially get hit in the future, so not this upcoming ban list, but maybe the ban list afterward. Jet Sylphimon, if we get a replacement for reinforced memory boost, rather another yellow level 5, or if yellow hybrids continues to be a problem. Calling from the Darkness is another card that just generates a lot of free value from purple, and it's a lot more free than you realize. Savior Huckmon, of course, if Savior Huckmon and Jesmon continue to prove to be an issue, even when all the first wave of ban list comes out, then definitely this card will need to be hit. And then Blinding Ray, because this card is absolutely obnoxious, especially you know if you played BT4 and BT5. So Jet Sylphimon is the card that comes up the most when it revolves around the yellow hybrid archetype. Jet Sylphimon, if we hit it, then it eliminates the archetype completely, and so hopefully we don't have to hit it anytime soon. The ideal situation is that if we hit both Reinforced Memory Boost and Mega Digimon Fusion, then Yellow Hybrid overall will become a lot weaker or more in line. Removing the Susanomon combo and Memory Boost will mean that Yellow will have to work a lot harder to get their lethal off, and that should be enough to hopefully keep them in check. And like I said, in the future, we'll most likely get another Yellow level 5 hybrid, and that can act as a replacement for Jet Sylphimon should it be hit. We may also potentially see an errata for Jet Sylphimon if Bandai ever decides to entertain that idea from the update pack, which they've mentioned, and if Jet Sylphimon said if you had 3 or less security, that would also work. Calling from the Darkness is a card that states delete one of your Digimon. Then you may retrieve 2 purple Digimon from your trash and add it to your hand. You do not have to pop a Digimon in order to retrieve 2, but if you do pop one, you're probably popping your Argomon, which will then generate 2 scatter modes, and that's just, come on, that's a lot of value. And so because of this basically relatively cheap, super free recursion, Calling from the Darkness may see a hit in the future if the Argomon engine proves to be too problematic, and just in general, it is a very, very powerful card. With all these other decks being hit, purple is most likely going to rise to the forefront, and so making a preemptive move to keep purple in check may be very, very wise.
Hey, this is Zero. So we've been informed by our attorneys that Hoang is not allowed to speak in relation to anything related to Jesmon. So here I am. Well, with Savior Hookman, this is a contentious choice, as we know the community is very split on this card. The reasoning is because this card is very necessary for Jesmon to function as a deck. Without it, I believe Jesmon would lose any sort of competitive viability as a deck. But it's also quite obnoxious to play into, because Jesmon is one of those decks where if your opponent just draw well and set up in raising, they can just come out and win the game, and there's pretty much nothing you can do about it. So there's several thoughts on how you go about limiting Jesmon, but the clear and most obvious problem is just to hit Saber Jesmon down, because this card does represent future design limitation for the deck as a whole, right? Because this is such a simple and easy condition for potentially any level 6 to get an extra swing in. So you could argue that any card with Jesmon in its name, or any deck that focus around the Jesmon engine and the battles and the Systemon are limited due to the existence of this card. So in the future, we get Jesmon X, Jesmon GX. Their designs have to be limited around this card, otherwise they'll be out of control. And so this is a card that we believe should be on the watch list. I personally don't think it should be banned for now, but I do believe that this is a card that needs to be hit in the future, especially if Jesmon get more support.
Alright, now that I am no longer legally obligated to not talk about Jesmon, we can finally go on to the next card on the list, Blinding Ray. Blinding Ray falls along the category of memory fixers such as Hammer Spark, Gravity Crush, and Jack Raid. But what Blinding Ray does that the other 3 don't is that it actively contributes to the entire deck's playstyle. Jack Raid is, for every 10 cards in your trash, you gain a memory. Cool. Gravity Crush, gain 2 memory, but then you lose 2 memory. Hammer Spark, just flat gain 1 memory. And that's cool and everything. But Blinding Ray, its cost, quote unquote, is trash the top of your security stack. And for yellow, that's nothing. It actively helps them achieve their winning con. Blinding Ray is just way too free in the context of yellow. In the future, we'll most likely see a new yellow deck come to the forefront, and they will also abuse Blinding Ray. If you played BT4 and BT5 with War Greymon and Lord Nightmon, you definitely know that Blinding Ray was by far the most frustrating card in that deck. This card may not be relevant in BT7 or BT8, but that does not excuse it from being potentially problematic once again in the future. And so I think this card should be hit relatively soon in order to prevent that from becoming another issue. And so now we're going to talk about how the meta is most likely going to be impacted should Bandai take the proposed bans of MDF, Ice Wall, and Reinforced Memory Boost. This is specifically for the BT7 meta, and then we'll talk about EX2 plus BT8. So in the BT7 meta, Argomon or discard aggro is likely to go up significantly, as two of its worst matchups will be lowered extremely lowered. And so because of that, the Argomon engine will be at full power, hypothetically, and so we'll definitely see this deck rise to the forefront, whether it's in the form of the Cerberus loop or Titamon. Green hybrid will also see a boost in play, as it no longer has to contest with yellow and blue hybrids. Rhino Kabuterimon is an absolutely phenomenal card, able to digivolve into Digimon such as Hercules or Ancient Beetlemon, and a whole plethora of things, really. Eventually Shivamon and BT8. Green hybrid can also abuse the red engine that allows them to use cards such as Atomic Inferno. Magna Garurumon decks will also see a boost in play because they no longer have to contest with blue hybrid in terms of popularity. With blue hybrid no longer being the flat out better version of the deck, Magna Garurumon will have its time to shine. Emperor Greymon or red hybrid will also see a significant boost in play because, again, it was being gated by blue hybrid. And so what this means is that red hybrid, if you haven't already invested into it, is going to be a huge powerhouse, most likely tier 1 of the BT7 format if the other decks are hit. Red has insane power. It was already on the cusp of being a high tier 1 deck to begin with, and now this will allow it to hit the upper echelons of that tier. Cherubimon will likely go up, as the ability to play Lucemons for free should never be underestimated, and the speed and power that comes out of the blue hybrid will be lowered. You get a lot of value from your board expansion. No more Ice Wall to have to give you that big pain. Gabumon, if you remember from the BT7 data analysis, was in 4th place as the most successful deck. Gabumon will see a rise as it no longer has to contest with the better blue hybrid stun variant, nor will it have to deal with the very grindy yellow hybrid. But because Ice Wall is hit, this is why Gabumon Bond of Friendship is not going to be a super significant buff, but rather it'll just be a buff because it no longer has to contest the blue hybrid. Same vein for Magna Garurumon. Magna Garurumon will still lose out on that Ice Wall, and so that hits it indirectly as well. Bellstar Musketeer is going to see significant buffs as well to all of this, as one of its worst matchups was the blue hybrid. Now, while one of its better matchups, given that yellow hybrid is also being hit, Bellstar will be a very interesting place. Bellstar using the Argomon engine is very, very powerful, so if you're a huge Musketeer fan, I definitely would suggest looking into this. And Lord Nightmon using Electric Rush is also a deck that may see a lot more play going forward into the future. Electric Rush will allow Lord Nightmon to swing twice, thus allowing it to call 2 Nightmons if necessary. You can also pair this up with Kazuchimon, who is a really cool SR from BT7 that I think this deck could potentially be fairly sleeper. Following up on cards that are impacted by the BT7 ban list change proposal, Jesmon would see a rise in play, or success rather, because of blue hybrid, which is one of its worst matchups, going down, lack of Ice Wall and potentially lack of MDF. But Jesmon's best matchup, being yellow hybrid, will also be weakened, and so that may put Jesmon into a really weird place in the meta, because while its worst matchup is weakened, its best matchup is also weakened. So a lot of players may not feel necessary, or the necessity rather, to play Jesmon unless they want to go for the higher roll. And of course, this isn't factoring in Savior Hackmon being hit. Lilith Loop will go down very significantly. Lack of MDF will hit the deck a lot, as well as decks such as red hybrids coming to the forefront as well. And Lilith Loop really abused and capitalized on hybrids being inherently slow because you had to set up tamers. So if the meta becomes faster, Lilith will see another hit via that. And the really big question in the room, security control. Security control did very poorly in the BT7 meta because you can't pop a tamer with security options, but because hybrids are being weakened, as well as the popularity of security control in the North American scene, we may have security control still emerge. Whether it's better or for worse, it remains a mystery. It completely depends on how the North American scene will use security control. And I say North American not to separate from the English scene, but really just because North America really likes security control, like a weird amount. People are weird. And now how decks in BT8 plus EX2 are impacted Armor Rush will see a huge buff in the meta now that they no longer have to contest blue hybrids. Armor Rush is going to be a fantastic answer to Jagras as well, Jagras being which another deck that will see significant success going up into the forward of the proposed ban list format. Jagras really struggled against hybrid decks just because of the inability to interact with them and how sticky some of their cards could be. So Jagras will see some success, and Armor Rush is pretty good into that Jagras. X Antibody was always on the cusp of being a strong tier 1 deck, but it was always limited by the hybrid decks, and so with hybrids being weakened, X Antibody may see a rise in the meta. Shivamon was actually a deck that answered blue hybrids very well, as well as yellow hybrids because of the ability to prevent them from using Ice Wall or Reinforced Memory Boost or other options along those lines. So with hybrids being hit, Shivamon will also see a slight hit. Black War Greymon decks will see a hit because Black War Greymon's primary function is to eliminate tamers, aka hybrids, and if hybrids see less play, then Black War Greymon will also see less play as a result. Galamon and Beelzemon are very much so intertwined. Beelzemon struggled against hybrids, and so with hybrids being weakened, Beelzemon will see much more play, and Galamon is a great answer to those purple decks as it capitalizes on them milling, allowing it to burn for more damage. So if Beelzemon sees more play, then Galamon will see more play. And Mother D-Reaper is getting a indirect buff as well because a lack of Ice Wall means that D-Reaper decks will be able to flood and swing for quite a bit. Ice Wall is what held that at bay. So a lack of Ice Wall means D-Reaper will become a lot stronger. Now, a lot of people are also talking about Argomon level 5 potentially coming off the ban list. With Digisorption having been toned down significantly in BT8, Argomon seems like a much more balanced card now. But the argument that Argomon could also remain on the ban list is that we now have Pistamon in BT8. Pistamon being a 1-cost Digisorption if you go about it that way. That's a lot more balanced than 0 cost. And so Green has 8 Digisorption targets, and as a result, they may use that as justification to leave Argomon on the ban list. Argomon's board expansion could also be easily abused by cards such as Rapidmon Armor, which then leads to board wipes, or Chimeramon, as Chimeramon thrives off of free bodies, and we all know Chimeramon can be a very, very difficult card to deal with, especially when you're generating it for free at the Eismon engine. Now, closing thoughts, I do just want to say that this is a hypothetical what we think at the Hoang Zero team the ban list should be, but very much so is up to Bandai's discretion as the ban list is not going to be announced for about another month or so. Definitely MDF, Icewell, and Reinforce need to get hit. We would like to see Eismon and Tommy also hit as well, but it's not guaranteed that Bandai will do so, and Jesmon should be hit in some capacity as Jesmon is an absolute menace in best of 1 formats. He's a lot more tame in best of 3, but even then we have to consider the best of 1 format that the Japanese format is played in. And of course, Calling, Blinding, and Jet Sylphie should be on the watch list alongside Savior Hackmon. I want to thank Tessero, Zero, and Desi for being part of this project, doing the analysis with me. All 4 of us have played a lot of the Japanese format as well as the English format, so we feel that we have a pretty good grasp on what to expect going forward for both formats. And we'd like to thank CG Guides for being where we obtained a lot of our data from. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to discuss this list that we've proposed or just any thoughts in general, please feel free to not only discuss it in my Discord, but you can discuss it in the comments as well, and I will do my best to answer everything. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope that you enjoyed it. So take it easy. Happy holidays. Happy New Year's.